Hi friends, and welcome back into my studio. If you are new here, my name is Tammy Ernest and I am a Longarm quilter, and here on my channel I like to share customer finishes as well as my own personal projects. So I'm so glad you've joined me today. We are just a week before Christmas. Can you believe it? It has gone so fast. I am so excited for this week. Daniel will be home later this week. He's finishing up his finals in the next couple days, and then he'll be home for a good month. It's amazing that they get that much time off from college, but we're excited to have him home. And then I get to babysit grandbabies this week. I'm so excited. So the advantage of being close to the grandkids is that Mom and Dad want to go shopping and they need to do some Christmas shopping. So I get to babysit both Ellie and Dallas this week, and I'm super excited. And just can't wait to spend the day holding those two. So I'm just excited about this week, and I am so excited to share something with you. This is Tail Feathers, and this is the quilt that I was so honored to do the piecing and the quilting as a sample for the Fat Quarter Shop, and I've received it back in the mail and I wanted to share it with you. So this was some secret sewing I did over the summertime. This pattern is by It's Sew Emma. It was designed by Crystal Stahl, and here is a copy of the pattern. Now if you purchase the pattern, it will actually have pictures of this quilt on the front. This was just a computer mock-up that they sent me when I was working on the pattern or working on the sample quilt. And once I finished it, then I sent it to them and they did all of their photo shoot with it. I love the pictures that they did, and you can find this on their website. And you can see the pictures that they did with this quilt. It's also on the front of the pattern if you get that. So the pattern itself comes in 4 sizes: crib, lap, twin, and queen. This is actually the lap size, which is 60 by 72. They do have a kit that is for this size and also uses this fabric line. And so this fabric line is called Countryside, and that was done by Lisa Audit for Riley Blake Designs. So lots of pretty plaids and florals. Some, you can't see that one, some polka dots up there. Just very, very cute. Really, really cute line. The colors are kind of, what do I want to say? Like a mauve color, pinks, and the I'd say like a slate blue, some light blues, a little more darker mauve colors as well. You can see some of the darker ones, and then there's the lighter ginghams and plaids. I really like it. I am so excited. So this uses the triangles on a roll. You can do it that way, or you can do it without it, whichever way is your preferred way of doing the half square triangles. So you can see this part of the block. Where can you see it better? This part of the block is done using the half square triangles, or the triangles on a roll. And you're creating these blocks here. And then you're joining that with the larger one. I just love the way this turned out. I'm super excited. The pantograph that I used on this quilt is called Cottonwood, and this is a Julie Hurt design. I just love this. It's the small. I did a pretty dense pattern. Kimberly Jolly of the Fat Quarter Shop likes dense quilting. When I was choosing a pantograph for it, I did send her 4 choices, and she picked which one she liked, and so she chose the Cottonwood. Love the density on this. I love the texture it creates, and let me pull it in closer so you can see it. So Cottonwood stitches out in 2 rows. It actually stitches like this, so I can show it to you. Stitches out 2 rows at a time. I do leave just a little bit, maybe an 1/8 inch of a space in between the rows so that I can match points a little better. And I did this in a white thread. This background fabric is a white, and I just kept it light and bright. The quilt top, the backing you can see is part of that same line, the Countryside line, and the backing set is available from Fat Quarter Shop if you want to do this line of fabric. And then I did the binding on it also, and this was the blue gingham or plaid, whichever one you want to call it. I call it this one a gingham myself. but in the blue. I like that binding on there also. So excited to have this back. So the way this worked is they sent me the pattern and the fabrics. I created the quilt, I did the quilting, did the binding, I sent it back to them. Then they do all their pictures that they need to do, and then they send the quilt back to me. So that was super exciting. The first time I've done it. I am scheduled to do some others in 2025, so I'm super excited about that, and I'll be showing you those as I finish up that quilting. And so if you're interested, I hope you'll buy the pattern or the quilt kit, either one. I'll link them both down below. And I thank Fat Quarter Shop so much for allowing me to be a sample maker. I'm just super enjoying that opportunity. The other thing I wanted to show you that I have worked on this week is the Hometown Holiday Sampler. This is a quilt along that was also going on, with the Fat Quarter Shop. I believe it has just ended. I'm still catching up, bringing up the tail end like I normally do. And so I wanted to share some of the blocks that I have worked on this week. I did, let me find the names of them. I started with the Shine Holiday Star blocks this week, and there were 3 of them. And so they're just in different spots on the quilt. Here's one here, and it's hard to find. And here's one here. It's like, you know, a search to try to find them. Anyway, there's a 3rd one on here somewhere. I don't see it right off the bat. Anyway, so there were 3 of these, and let me show you those blocks. All right. So 2 of them are kind of close in their coloring. I guess they're all 3 kind of close. They all have blue around the outside edge. These 2 actually have the same blue but different greens in the middle. They all have the square and a square part, or the outer square is a tan color. So this uses Lori Holt's line Hometown Holiday. All the fabrics from that. Fabrics for this one, I love this line. I really like it. Really, really pretty. This one's a little different, a little lighter blue, still has that same brown there, but the pink, the gingerbread, the gingerbread laying on their tray right there. You're just ready for them to jump up and run, if you know that story. Anyway, the background fabric is used throughout the quilt. We had like 8 yards, 8 yards of that. So I have it rolled up on a bolt. I starched it all, and then I just rolled it back onto a bolt. Not an empty one, it was one that already had some other fabrics on there, but I just rolled my backing fabric up onto there, and then I cut strips as I need more just off of that, is how I'm doing that. So those are the 3. What I wanted to show you is this block here, and let me see if they name if Lori talks about what that one is. So I wanted to show you how I did these blocks right here. So there are 4 of them in each of the larger blocks. And the directions actually have you cut your squares and then subcut them into 4 triangles. And I don't like to do that. I don't like to sew on that bias if I can help it. And I felt like that makes the pieces really small. So I brought a little bit of a sample to kind of show you what I did. So let me swap these out here. And so these squares actually start with 3.5. I started with a little bit smaller squares. I started with 2.5 squares, 2.5 inch squares. And so if you'll notice, this is made up of 3 different fabrics. So we have the 2 sides are one fabric, and then we have the brown, and then we have the background print. And I want to show you how to do that. So a little different way, instead of cutting all your pieces into, cutting your squares into 4ths and then sewing on that diagonal, this is how I do it. So I have picked a white background print, a red, you're seeing the back side of that, and then this one is a blue and a white, okay? So how I would make this block is I would cut my squares, whatever size the pattern says, and I cut my squares the same size as Lori suggested in the directions, but I did not subcut it into the 4. I left them as these started at 3.5. I have 2.5 inch squares here, and I layered a white with a blue, right sides together, and then I sew down you can draw a diagonal line across there. I typically don't. These are small enough that I can tell where the diagonal line is. I do have one of Lori's, what she calls it, the seam guide things on the bed of my machine, so that you know, I have the 1/4 inch marked on my foot. But when you're doing a block like this and it comes out a little farther away from my foot, you know, my foot's going to be up here, so it comes out a little bit farther. By having that seam guide a little larger, it's her flower shaped ones, I can see down here that I'm still at a 1/4 inch, and so I just run it along. So I don't typically draw the line. To me, it's just an extra step, unless it's just a really large block. You know, maybe on one of these I might do that, but these smaller blocks I really don't. So I stitched down 1/4 inch away from that diagonal line, and I did that for both the blue and the white and for the red and the white. Okay, and so then I cut those apart and press it open, and so I have a red. You're going to get two, but I'm just showing you one right here. So you have a red half square triangle, and I have a blue half square triangle. Okay, now you can tell I haven't trimmed these up yet. I don't feel that there's a need to trim them up at this point. So in order to get this hourglass type unit, I am going to then layer the blue with the red. And I'm going to layer it so if my red and white is face up, then I'm going to take my blue and white, and I want the whites to be opposite sides. So notice here my white is on the left, and here I'm putting these face right sides together, and I want my white on the right side of this one. So I layer those together, and I want to make sure that my lines are right on top of each other. Okay, I did press open, you can see. So I make sure my lines are right on top of each other, and then I actually pin this part. I didn't bring any pins to show that, but I will pin right across here, and I will pin right across here, because I want those seams to stay right on top of each other. Okay, then I will turn it this direction, and I will stitch a 1/4 inch away from both sides of that diagonal line. And I brought one to show you like that. No, I didn't. Let me show you. This one's already been cut, but you can, this would be like if it was, you know, this one's already been cut, but that's, I would stitch a half or a 1/4 inch away from the diagonal line on both sides, and then I cut those apart, and then when you open it up, you have the hourglass unit with all three colors on there. Okay, now you can do hourglass units if I wanted it both, you know, blue and white only, then you would do the same thing, except I would have a red, or let's do this one. I would have a blue and white, and then the other blue and white one, and I would layer them on top of each other. Again, the whites need to be opposite, the blues need to be opposite each other, and then you stitch down a 1/4 inch away from either side of that diagonal. And then that would give you an hourglass unit that is just two colors, blue and white. But if you want the three colors, then you can do the same thing. You're just swapping your blocks, and just make sure your whites are on opposite sides, and you layer them, and then stitch a 1/4 inch away from that diagonal line on both sides. And then then I did trim it up afterwards. Now, because I started with 2.5 inch squares, it ends up 1.5 inches. But if you do whatever is listed in your directions, whatever quilt you're working on, you can cut it the same size as written in your directions. So for this block, in Lori's block, they were cut 3.5 inch squares. I'm doing the same thing, except I'm doing the stitching before I'm doing the cutting. And in Lori's directions, she has you cut before you do the stitching. Either way is fine. I prefer to do it this way. I prefer to work with bigger pieces and then press them open and and then trim it up afterwards, instead of working with those triangles. So just something you can try. And that's the way I like to do them, and it worked out great. You can see those there. So there are 3 of those shine blocks. And then I also worked on the next ones, which were the sparkle ones. Now there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of these. Is that right? No. These two went with that other one. I'm like, I didn't think I made 7 of them. There are 5 of these blocks. 4 of them are the same. I'll show you those 2 things in just a second. 4 of them are the same because they are the corners of the quilt, and then 1 of them is different. Okay, so these are the sparkle blocks. Quite a few steps to this one, but nothing too difficult. So the way Lori has you do it, you join a brown square right here with the background square, and then you layer that with, or then you join that with a rectangle of the brown. Then you do easy, she calls them easy corner triangles, easy corner triangle on this side, easy corner triangle on this side, and an easy corner triangle on this side. So you're starting with a full square right there, a quarter of it white, and then 3/4 of it brown, and you're adding all these easy corner triangles. And this is just lattice work. It's super simple. You have a rectangle with a square on each end, and then you're just joining those pieces together. These 4 are all the same. I love this fabric, this aqua one with the red. It's very pretty. Those 4 blocks are all the same because they are used in the 4 corners of the quilt. Notice they are the corners with the borders. So that's why 4 of those, and they are all the same. So I did also want to show you something that I did with these blocks. I mentioned this last week that when I am doing these easy corner triangles, and I should have brought another one that wasn't sewn together yet, but when I'm doing these easy corner triangles and I press this background fabric, let me get rid of a few of these. Okay, so when I'm doing this square here and I press this background fabric back, then there are 2 layers underneath here. There's a background from this square, the other half of this triangle, and then there's also an aqua print back here. It's the other half of this triangle. So those 2 layers are behind there. So before I trim it, well, first of all, I always press this top layer back to that corner of the other prints because I know that I'm square if I press that back first. Then I will flip that back and I will do another stitch a little less than 1/4 inch away from this one because, you know, my seam doesn't, I mean, it's kinda, but it's not all the way at 1/4 inch away from this other seam. So I stitch a second seam there, and then I trim those back 2 pieces off, and they're sewn together because I've done another seam right there. And notice with this block right here, I have 3 easy corner triangles. So I have 3 blocks that I am trimming off. And that means I have 3 here, 3 here, 3 here, 3 here. I have a total of 12 little pieces that I'm cutting off. And 8 of them are going to match with the green and the white, or the aqua in the background print. And then 4 of them are going to match. They're going to be this aqua and the red print. And let me show you what I do with those then. I think these are so cute. So those 4 pieces that I cut off, I press those open and then join them with the other pieces, and it makes a little pinwheel block. So this one right here is what was taken off the back of this easy corner triangle, the parts in the middle right here. This one are the easy corner triangles from just 4 of these. I have another 4 that I can make another one with. So aren't these just so cute? And this is fabric that I would have thrown away. And, you know, if I just trimmed them off, and I would have tossed them in. But again, I like to do that seam first before trimming it away from the other block. Because if I do that seam first, then I'm working with a 1.5 inch square and not on the diagonal of a 1.5 inch square. So I have this 1.5 inch square right there. I join all 4 to get a pinwheel in the middle. And then I did trim this up to 2 inches, 2.5. But it'll finish 2 in a quilt. So aren't those so cute? So if you want to, there's a lot of little pieces. Here's all the others that I took off of here. Look at all those that I have. And that was just from these 5 blocks of those sparkle blocks. Now last week I did the same thing with some of the blocks I did last week. And so I will have a bunch of little pinwheels to do something with. I don't know. I could put them into a border. I could put them all together and make a project bag with them. I could make a table runner. I could make some other larger, because these may be all different sizes depending on what size I'm trimming them off of, and so I could join 4 together and have some larger ones, and I don't know what I'll do with them, but I just think they're super cute and fabric that I didn't want to waste. So fun. So my plans for this week are to continue to work on this quilt. Actually, we're only a week away from Christmas, so next week I will be putting up my sewing room tour video. I will actually wait till the day after Christmas to load that and to put that up for you, so you'll have something to do the day after Christmas. You can join me here for my sewing room tour. It's of my Longarm room as well as my my personal sewing little space upstairs, and I'll be sharing that next week. And the following week I will be putting up my question and answer video. So I've been gathering questions that you have, and I will be providing those answers, and that will come out probably New Year's Day, maybe the day after, depending on how busy I get in the next week and a half, whether I get that all edited and put up, one of those 2 days. So you can be looking for those 2 things. So in the meantime, the next couple weeks, I plan on working a bunch on this. Hopefully I have a lot of time to work on this. And I'm hoping to get some of my own long arm quilting done as well. I am taking a break for a couple weeks from client quilts, and hope to get some of my own long arm projects done. So I hope to share those with you after the first of the year. So that's the schedule for the next couple weeks. And I hope you have a Merry, Merry Christmas, because I'm not sure I said it when I filmed the sewing room tour. I don't think I mentioned that it was Christmas and wishing you a Merry Christmas. So this is my opportunity to wish you a Merry Christmas. All right, so one of the other things I wanted to address, you may notice, I'm sure you have noticed, that in my videos the last several weeks that I start out with my introduction showing you my personal quilting, and then I go on to customer quilts, and a lot of times I'm wearing something different. It used to be when I first started my channel, I would save the quilts that I'd worked on all week, and I would film them all at once, then I would box them all up and take them to the post office all at one time. And I kind of switched that up in the last month or two, and as I finish a quilt, I go ahead and film it, box it up, and get it out to the client. So they're not waiting any longer than they have to. For me to film, I just go ahead and film right then. So a lot of times you'll notice I'm wearing something different. It's because I filmed the day that I finished that quilt, and I'm shipping it off to the client. I have thought about maybe I should get like a smock type thing, like hairdressers wear, and so then I could wear that every day and you wouldn't know what day it was, but it is what it is, you know. So that's why you'll see a lot of times I have different outfits on throughout a video. As you see, it's because I'm taping at different times and then putting them all together as one video to share with you. So speaking of that, let's move on to some customer quilts. I'll show you what I've been working on this week. This is Karin's quilt, and this measures 72 by 84, and this is the pattern 4-Patch Charm by Amanda Niederhauser of Jedi Craft Girl. She has an Etsy site, so I will link that down below. I love this pattern. I think it is so cute. So you can see it's a 4-patch in the middle of each block, and then it's almost like this running stitch. Isn't that what it looks like? Like a running stitch around or in the stashing parts of the blocks. And I love the cornerstones. They are the gray, and then she's done yellow, or the goldy yellow on the sides of all of the blocks. I love the pattern. I think the pattern is really cute. It's simple. but it's just really, really cute. Karin did a great job on this. The fabric line that Karin chose for this is called Honey and Lavender. This is by Deb Strain, and she did that for Motive Fabrics. So this is all bumblebee honeycomb themed. It's super, super cute. It's a little different colorway with the lavender thrown in. That's a little different than I've seen before. It's really cute. It's really, it's like a little bit of a play on the gray. So you have some darker, I'd say a dark gray, not really black, a very dark gray with, it's all bumblebee themed. So just different motifs with bumblebees. Here you have a lighter gray that's got just the white on top of the gray. This is more of a golden yellow print. This one has bumblebees, very subtle yellow on yellow or gold on gold, honeycomb shapes there, honeycomb shapes in the lavender. So some larger florals, some smaller florals, you have some ginghams, so grays, golden, and then you have a very darker honey kind of color, and then with the grays. So she's done a nice job of blending the lavenders in with some of these other, just very subtle, in with some of these other darker gray prints here. Let me pull this in so you can see just a tad bit what I'm talking about. So like this here is a lavender print that has the gold and the gray on it, and then here's a black gingham in there. A very dark gray. It's really not a black. And then you have some gray of the honeycombs. Here is a gold on gold, like bee-skep type thing there. And then with this dark gray one, she's got just this little sprigs of the lavender thrown in here. So it's a nice mix and a little different colorway than I've seen before, but very, very effective. So the pattern then has a larger border around the edge, and Karin has done that with some of the yardage from that fabric line. The back has the darker gray. I like that. Your front of your quilt is a lighter color, and so just giving the quilt some depth, I think, by adding the darker color on the back. I really like that. A little bit of, I'd say this is a medium floral on the back, but this one of the same prints that's used in the front. Very, very cute. I did the binding on this one as well, and she used one of the yellow bee prints on the binding. I think that is so cute, and we'll talk about binding in just a minute. I like the yellow around the outside of that darker border too. Really, really cute. So the pantograph on this one, she asked for something bumblebee themed, and so I sent her several different choices. The one she chose was Buzzy Bees. Now I found this on Urban Elements. For those of you who are not digital long arm quilters, you can buy more pantographs to be loaded onto the tablet from different companies that put out digital pantographs. Urban Elements is probably my top one that I go to, but there's others: Intelligent Quilting, My Creative Stitches, Three Sisters Fabric does some, and there's many. Julie Hurt and Barbie Mills both have Etsy shops. Lots of other Etsy shops that have them. But when I'm looking for a new design, so Karin asked for a bumblebee, I tend to go to Urban Elements first, and then if I don't see what I like, I kind of go other places. And so there were several on Urban Elements that had a bee-related theme, and I sent those to Karin, and then she chose the Buzzy Bees one. I did this one in Omni Thread Beige, which is 3068. You see it's just a tad bit darker than a cream that I a lot of times use. I guess my three go-to threads would be my cream 3004, the natural white, and then the light gray in Omni. Those are the three that I use. I would say 75% of the time. And then the other percent is I'm changing just a little bit just because of the tone of the quilt, or someone asked for a little bit more color. But most quilts have those, those first three that I mentioned. I felt this one with the dark backing on it here, the threads or the fabric on the front is just a little more subdued, a little more, not really muted, but just a little more subdued. They're not bright. They're not you know, they're almost like a late summer type of feel to them. And so I went with 3068, which is the beige. It's just a tad bit darker. So those bumblebees do show up just, you know, you really get a hint of those bumblebees on those lighter fabrics, and I like that. On these 4 patches, when the fabrics are darker, you really have to get in close even to see the motif. But I like that, just a little bit of a bumblebee theme. On the lighter prints, you can see it just a little darker, so like they're flying all over the quilt. Let me get this in closer and see if you can see. I like this one. I was really glad that Karin chose this one because of the ones I sent her. This is probably the one that I like the most. I'm trying to find a spot where you can see the bumblebee the best. So maybe right here. All right, I'll try to get this so you can see. So this bumblebee, this one is going to be upside down just the way I'm holding the quilt, but it's got a very, I like the little bit of a chunkiness to the bumblebee. It has nice loopy wings to it. The body of it has 2 stripes across it, like you would have for actually 4 stripes, but 4 lines across it. But if you know a bumblebee, those stripes would be in black. So you can just picture this inner little parts of those stripes would be black. I like the shape of the body. I like the loopiness of the wings. The head is a nice round shape, and then the antennas, I like just the loopiness. They're small, they're you know, proportional to the bee, but they're just a little bit chunky, and I really, really, really like that. So this one I actually stitched out long ways. This quilt measures 72 by 84, so I actually had the 84 the long ways. And so when that stitches out, my bumblebees are going across in this direction. So I have a bumblebee, and then it has a little spiral, and then it goes into the next bumblebee and a little spiral. So when you're stitching it out, this bumblebee, if you can see that over there, this bumblebee is facing up, this bumblebee is facing down, this one's up, this one's down, and that's the way it goes across the quilt. By doing this with the long ways horizontal, then when I do the quilt, the way I have it here, it's actually upside down. But when I was laying it out for pictures, then it looks like all the bumblebees are flying this way. And it wasn't something I did intentionally. I really did it, I can't remember. I can't remember if I did it because the backing fabric had a horizontal seam. I really can't remember why I even stitched it out with the long ways that way. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. Sometimes it depends on the backing, how it's oriented. Sometimes it depends on how much backing fabric I have. If a client, and I'm not saying Karin did this, I really don't remember, but sometimes a client will send a little less backing than I like, and it's much easier if I have a backing that's a little short, one direction or the other. It's actually easier to load the short in. So say a client, I always ask for 4 inches larger on every side, but say a client gives me 5 inches. Okay, let me back up. I asked for 4 inches larger on every side. That means the quilt, the backing should measure 8 inches larger both directions than the quilt top, right? 4 or 8 divided by 2 would be 4 on each side. So let's say the quilt is 60 by 60, and that means I want the backing to be 68 by 68. Let's say a client is trying to squeeze in some fabric, you know, they're trying to, oh, I think this will work, and they send me a 64 by 68. That means I've only got 4 extra inches, 2 extra inches on one side of it. It is much easier to have that quilt loaded with the smallest margins where I can see them going all the way down the quilt. To do the smallest margins on my leaders, I can't control getting to the end and it not being enough fabric, if that makes sense. A lot of times I'll ask clients to add extra fabric. So say that scenario is 60 by 60. I really would like the backing to be 68 by 68. Perhaps their backing's only 62 by 62. That one's just not doable. I cannot load it on the long arm and give myself enough room There's just no way. And so a lot of times I'll just advise clients then to add some extra fabric. If I have 62 by 62 backing and you add some extra strips of fabric around that, I will fit your quilt within, a 60 by 60 quilt within that 62, as long as it's square. It still has to be square, because if it's not square, then I can't adjust it into there. But that's a great trick. If you've got a backing fabric, you only have so much. It is larger than your quilt top, but not quite the margin that your long arm quilter wants. Go ahead and add some extra fabric around the edge. Those are the fabrics that we need to attach to the leader bars to give ourselves some extra room. You have to attach the quilt somewhere. This is different than doing it on a domestic machine, or even doing it hand quilting, where you don't need a margin around the edges. With a long arm quilter, I have to be able to attach that backing to the leader bars, so I need that extra fabric around there. And so just add some extras. Make sure your backing is still larger than your quilt top. If your quilt top is 60 by 60 and you send me a backing that is 60 by 60 with some extra fabrics around it, I will not be able to fit your quilt within that 60 by 60. There is just no way on a long arm to be able to guarantee that it's going to fit within that. If you give me a larger backing and still have to add some fabric around it to give me the 4 inches larger, then yes, I can fit that 60 by 60 within your parameters of the nicer quilt backing that you want. But be kind to your long arm quilters. There's just, things with using a machine, when attaching it to the leader bars, we just need some extra fabric. And especially when you're rotating a quilt, your quilt is loaded. It's loaded 3 ways. So it's not like in hand quilting where you're basting the 3 together. This goes on the long arm as 3 separate pieces. So the quilt top is loaded onto one bar. The backing fabric is loaded onto another bar. And then the batting, I float my batting in between, meaning that my batting is attached. I do a straight stitch across the top when I'm first loading the quilt, but then my batting just hangs down over. It just hangs down over the front of the quilt. It's not attached to anything. I don't roll it on a bar. I don't have it rolled on a bar underneath. It's just hanging down the front. And I don't float my quilt tops, but I do just let my batting hang down over. So as you're rotating a quilt, if you're basting a hand, if you're hand quilting or you're doing it on your domestic and you're basting your quilt, so all 3 of those layers are staying together as they're going through the machine. Because this is on 3 different bars, or 2 different bars with the batting in the middle, it can stretch in different ways. So especially a quilt top that has a lot of maybe it's got a lot of bias piecing, or perhaps it's got a lot of seams. Something with a lot of seams is going to stretch. Every one of those seams is just going to be, stretched a little bit more than if it was one solid piece of fabric that's not going to stretch. So that's another reason why we need that extra backing fabric, is because as it rotates, that backing fabric may not stretch quite as much as the quilt top stretches. And I'm talking minuscule, but if you see every little every seam in this horizontally, that's a lot of seams. And if each one is only stretching, a 1/16 of an inch, over all those seams, that's a good inch by the time I get to the end. And if I don't have enough clearance, then I'm running into problems at the end. So I hope that helps you understand. I'm not trying to make excuses for long arm quilters. I'm just saying I hope you understand the process and why we need that extra backing fabric. That was a whole long tangent. Back to Karin's quilt, I really don't remember why I loaded it the other way. Perhaps it was just because the horizontal, if I do the lengthwise, I'm not having to rotate the quilt as often. But I like the effect that occurred when I did this pantograph, because then it has the feel that all the bumblebees are facing up, instead of as it's quilting, one's down, one's up, one's down, one's up. And then by orienting the quilt this way, all of them are they're like this all the way up and down the quilt. So it turned out really cute. I really like that. Let me talk about binding for just a minute. I do offer binding services as well. It does add a little bit of time to your turnaround time, just because I schedule a quilt on my queue for a certain week, but then to do the binding is going to add a little bit of time to that. But I do binding services, but that's not what I want to talk about. I want to talk about my binding bag. It's been a while since I have shared with you my binding bag. This is a bag that I keep downstairs right next to my couch because I do all my hand binding in the evening when I'm with the family. So to me, this is TV time. This is, listening time. This is talking time when I'm with the family. I can be working on binding. So I do attach the binding to the front of the quilt with my domestic machine, and then I bring this downstairs and I do hand stitching to the back. I don't do my binding on the long arm. Couple reasons I've not gotten proficient at it. I really not practiced it at all. I would rather be working, moving quilts through with the pantographs rather than spending time doing my binding on there. I know it saves time, people say, but it is a whole process of, putting the binding down the side. You've got to rotate that quilt and rotate that quilt. After I've already done the quilting, you're doing all of that again. I would rather just pull that off, start another quilt on the long arm. While that one's running, I go do the binding on my domestic machine. So I don't feel like I'm wasting my time or spending too much time doing that, because I'm using the long arm for something else. The other reason I don't do it, I have seen some troubles where the binding is stretched too much when you're putting it on the long arm, and then you're getting those ripples in the quilt. I really like, I like the look of attaching it by machine on the front and then hand stitching it on the back. I'm not a big fan of fold over bindings, moving the backing to the front and folding that over. Personally, I don't like that look very well. And I know many people have gotten proficient at doing their bindings completely on a domestic machine, where they are stitching from the front straight through to the back, and, or they attach it to the front. I don't know, they attach it to the back and then flip it over to the front and sew down the front. I don't know, I guess I'm too traditional. I really like the look of stitching it to the front by machine and then hand stitching it down on the back. I'm getting off on some tangents again, aren't I? So this is my binding bag. I do keep it right next to the couch downstairs. And in my binding bag, I've pulled out a couple of things that I thought there's other things in here, you can hear it shaking, but a couple of things that I use all the time that may help you in your binding as well. So the first thing I always need are my readers. I have several pairs of readers. These are Lori Holt ones that I really like. These are 4.0. I don't necessarily need 4.0. I have several of Lori Holt's readers, and some I keep in my binding bag. Actually, I have 2 pairs in my binding bag. Some I keep in my cross stitch bags, and I just, not necessarily that I need the 4.0. I could go a little less than that, but I have several different pairs and I can use them all. So my vision, actually, I don't know if you want to know this, but I'll throw it in there for good measure. I have always worn contacts my entire life. I actually had, not my entire life. When I was in high school, realized I could not see the chalkboard. And but I was too vain to get glasses. And so I had contacts before I ever got glasses. And I'm nearsighted, so I've always had contacts that help me to see distance. Well, as you get older, you know that kind of changes. And several years ago, I went to the monovision, where one sees far and one sees up close, because I found with both my contacts seeing far, I was always wearing readers, and it was driving me crazy. I'm like, I do not need to be doing this all the time. I've never had LASIK surgery or anything like that. So I switched to the monovision, where my right eye sees distance and my left eye sees up close. And so that helps me with almost everything except cross stitching and binding. I just need that little bit of extra reader just to see a little bit better, a little clearer up front or up close. Now, probably about, it's been less than a year ago, I went to the eye doctor, and he says, you may find that you don't even want to wear the up close one, because my vision is to the point where I can see really, really well up close. And so he says, you may get to the point you don't even wear that left contact. And I finally I'm like, if I don't need to wear a left contact, why am I paying for it? So I finally went to the point, I only wear one contact, and it's in my right eye, and it helps me see distance. It is a little bit of an adjustment. I do find the only time I have a little bit of trouble is stairs. And maybe it's my balance as I'm getting older. I don't know, but the stairs, I feel a little uneasy, especially if we're in we went to an IU basketball game a year or so ago, or even a football game, and just going down, I need something to hold on to, and because I'm just a little unsteady. Even our stairs here at home, if I'm carrying something, I just find that depth perception by having one contact and not one, that is just a little off. Again, I'm telling you way more information than you need to know. But today I only wear one contact. I only wear the long distance one. The funny thing is, I have never cried all my life in cutting onions. And suddenly, when I only have one contact in, when I cut onions now, my left eye cries and my right eye does not. So that contact is what is, I guess shields my eyes from the fumes or the aroma, something of the onions. And now I sit and cry. My girls laugh at me now because I sit and cry with one eye and not my other one when I cut onions. But in doing binding, I still use my readers, even though my vision in my left eye is very good up front, or up close. I don't know why I keep saying up front, but up close, I still use readers for doing binding and for cross stitch. Another thing I keep in here, I got this in a sew sampler box probably a couple years ago, but I'm sure these are still available. I'll link it down below. This is just a magnetic needle case, and I keep, it looks like 5 or 6 needles in here. These are all sharp needles that I use for binding. I like to keep just a tad bit of thread on there because that helps me pick them up off of the bed of this a little easier. Otherwise, I'm chasing a needle around. But I like to have these rather than I have another little thing in here that has them all poked into their original packaging, I guess. But I really like just being able to open this up. I know these are all sharps. They're not tapestry needles or anything that I use for cross stitch. I keep those in my other bags. But this is only used for binding, and it's always sharp needles with a little bit of thread on it. Then in my binding bag, I keep, again, these came with sew sampler boxes. These are little, I don't even think these are full things. I think they may be, I don't know. But little spools of Mettler thread. I first just stuck these in my binding bag because I don't use colored thread when I'm piecing my quilts. I keep an Aurifil cone always on my domestic machine, and that's what I stitch with all the time, unless I'm doing hemming a pair of pants or something like that where I need to switch to a darker color. So when I got these in the sew sampler box, I really don't want to use them on my domestic machine because I'm using that Aurifil. So I dropped these in my binding bag. And so these were all 4 colors that came in a sew sampler box, but you can get little spools like these. And I keep these in here, and this is what I use to do all my binding. Now, Mettler thread has just a tiny bit of a slicky, not super slicky. I'm not like it's hard to hold on to at all, but it binds very nicely. It's a strong thread. It glides through most fabrics very easy, and I don't have a problem with it. And so I like that every once in a while a sew sampler box sends new colors, and I have found that I use these colors depending on the backing or the binding color that I'm doing. Now for this one, it did have a dark binding or a dark backing, but it had the yellow binding on it. I did use a cream color thread. The stitching that I do on my binding, and I'll try to get this in close, I do not let my threads show at all. And so using a cream color thread on here was fine because it really matches this yellow a little bit better. Now if I'm doing a darker one, and I'll show you another one here in just a second. I did switch to a dark color for doing this one because of the thread, because of the color of the binding and the color of the backing. But something like this, I'm not going to switch to a yellow. I'm not going to do a dark gray. I just kept it with the cream color, and it worked fine. So those are always in my bag. And then another thing, oh, a pair of sharp scissors. Always keep scissors in your binding bag. And then the other thing I am really, really enjoying, and I think, I didn't look this up before I came on camera, but I really think these came in a Sew Sampler box, but I will link them down below. These are called thimble pads. I love these. So I haven't been one to use a thimble much. Again, TMI here, too much information, but my big finger here, now I have arthritis in it, but I have always had a callus on my finger. I guess I wrote too much when I was a kid, I don't know, but I've always had a writer's callus on my finger. And so this finger has always been a little too large to wear a thimble on, to be honest. But I get to the point, if I do too much binding, then I feel that sometimes the end of that needle will poke through my skin, and I just don't like that. So I have been using these thimble pads. These are little dots. You see there's 6 of them on that card. So it came with 12, I guess. I've used 6 of them so far. And you peel these off and you put it right there on the pressure point, wherever it is that you push the needle through. I love these. They are padded. You can kind of see the thickness there. I mean, it's like a cork type of thing. They're sticky on the back. The adhesive is sticky where it's removable. As soon as I'm done, I peel it off and throw it away. But it stays. It's not like halfway through a binding I'm having to replace it. This stays the entire time. I've even finished binding and gone in the kitchen to get a snack or something and realize I still had the pad on my finger. So it is adjustable. So if you put it in a spot and you're finding, oh, that's not quite where I want it, you can peel it off and put it back. And I've had it, even after I've adjusted it, it stays put until I take it off. So thimble pads, it says hugs your finger. You'll forget it's there, which I have. No slipping or thread catching, reusable adhesive, use it again and again. I have not tried putting them back on here and then using them later. I should try that. That would make them last even longer. But I just use it, I use it till I'm done and then I throw it away. But maybe I should try that. But I really like these. If I can find these or something similar, I'll link them down below because these are a must have in my binding bag now. So those are all things. Again, I got this in a Sew Sampler box one time. So I use this stuff. You're thinking the Sew Sampler box, you're never going to use this. I use the things I get in there all the time. And so I love this bag. And I just keep this downstairs next to the couch. And that's when I work on my bindings. So that is Karin's quilt. And did the binding on that one as well. So cute. And that's ready to go home to Karin. And next I have a quilt by Doris, and this is so cute. So this pattern is Pat Sloan's 2024 Ode to Our National Parks. This was Pat Sloan's weekly block. On Wednesday she puts out a free block, and this ran from September through November, and based on a book about the national parks. I don't watch a lot of Pat Sloan. I love Pat Sloan. I think she's really great, but it's just not, I just don't have time to watch everybody. But these are free patterns, at least at the time of filming. This is still free pattern. So I have linked to the spot on her website down below where she gives the I have linked to the spot on her website where she gives the supply list, and then she shows each of the blocks that are used in this quilt. And so what you do is you will scroll down through there, and it'll show you the block, it'll say week 1 underneath it. If you click on that link that says week 1, then you can print out the free PDFs. And like I said, at the time I'm filming this, they are still free. I don't know if she continues these up forever, but then you can print out, oh, that's still the beginning ones. So then you can print out the block design. So I love this because, so first you would want to print out the supply list, the layout directions, just like this. And then each one of the blocks is still there as of the time I'm filming. You can print those out. I love that she gives a little bit of other information at the top, just, you know, classic Pat Sloan, really cute. Then she describes how to make the whole block. Then she shows you how, if you just wanted to use that one block to make a quilt, you could use just that one block. Gives you a coloring page, and I've only printed out the first 2 blocks, but both of the first 2 blocks have that coloring page and a layout if you wanted to do the entire quilt just with one block. Both of those have it. So great information. You'll want to check that out. And Ode to Our National Parks, that is on Pat Sloan's website, and I'll link that down below. Doris did hers in Serenity Blues. This is by Jerry Robinson for Riley Blake Designs. Love the blues. You have some small florals and some larger florals. It's all done in blues and grays, kind of a khaki color, gray, not khaki. Some people think khaki is green. Different people have different connotations of khaki. So I would say this is more of a taupey gray. We'll go with that. A taupey gray, and then the light blue, and then the darker blues, large florals, small florals, and then you can see each one of Doris's blocks. Now notice on the pattern, it's not your traditional grid layout. It's offset just a little bit, which is really cute. So 9 blocks in this one. Each one of the blocks is different. And each one of them had a story as to why Pat Sloan chose those blocks and how that relates to one of our national parks. Great idea. Pat Sloan used a totally different colorway. It does say that it is, let me find that again, that it is fat eighth or fat quarter friendly. So you can choose your favorite fat eighth bundle or fat quarter bundle to create the quilt top. The final measurements are 52 by 66. And so cute. Backing fabric, she chose this. This is either a royal blue or a midnight blue cuddle minky. I love, I say this every time, but just in case you're new here, I love the texture you can see on a minky. I just think it's absolutely adorable. So backing fabric, or the pantograph, is going to be much easier to see on the minky than it is on the quilt top. This is called Cartwheels, and this is by Julie Hurt. She does have an Etsy site, and I will link that down below. This stitches out in 1 row at a time, and you have your cartwheel that's, each one of them is a 4-wheel or 4-petal flower, I guess you want to say, or if you can picture it like a, you know, like a cartwheel. If you were doing a I can't do a cartwheel. If you were doing a cartwheel, your arms and legs, your arms up, your legs out, and, you know, you're standing and then you're spinning and you're standing and you're spinning. So it just like rotates across the quilt. Really, really cute. Love this design. Again, with this one, I've kind of mentioned this before, where if you pull it in to your design, you could stack the same motifs on top of each other. So if you wanted the part where it has the 4 cartwheels straight up, you could stack those on top of each other, and you could do, that would be a totally different design. I have offset mine by half so that the one that's standing upright is then alternated with the row above it, so that it's, I don't know if I'm making sense there at all. I've offset the row by half so that the same design is not on top of each other, but it's alternating in a checkerboard fashion there. So thread color, I did use a light gray on this one. Thought that blended really well with the top. And of course with Minky, it just soaks in, you don't see that. I did the binding on this one as well. And I get the question a lot, binding with Minky on the back, do I need to make my strips larger? I have found that you do not. I still do a 2.5-inch strip. The other one that I just showed you, the Bumblebee quilt, I usually put my binding on about at a 3/8 inch, not at a 1/4 inch, just because I like the binding to be fully filled up. So when I'm using all cottons, I will put my binding on at 3/8 of an inch, and maybe just inside of that, you know, but closer to the 3/8 than the 1/4 inch. When I'm doing minky, I do it a little closer to the 1/4 inch. Some parts in this I did on a 1/4 inch, and I just felt like I would have liked it a little fuller. I don't know that anybody else is going to notice that. So I would still keep it within, you know, even with minky, I would keep it at your 1/4 inch if that's like what you like to do your bindings on. Stitch it on at a 1/4 inch. If you're like me and like the binding to be a little fuller, you either have to cut back the size of your strips to maybe a 2 1/4, or you just increase your where you're sewing it onto the front of the quilt, and I usually do mine at 3/8 of an inch. So with a quilt like this, when you have a border all around the edge, a 3/8 of an inch is not going to be noticeable. If you're doing one that has points all the way out to the edge, you may want to make your binding more at a 2 1/4, cut that, you know, then fold that in half and add that on right at a 1/4 inch so that you're not cutting off those points on a quilt top. But majority of the quilts that I do have bindings around them, and so I like the 3/8 inch and the 2 1/2 inch wide strips. So there is Doris's quilt. So cute. This is Marsha's Civil War reproduction quilt, and I absolutely love this. Very simple. Quilting does not have to be difficult. So this is called a rail fence block is what it is. Marsha has done hers in 4 strips each. Her block measures, you know, if you wanted to do simple, maybe it measures 8 inches. I'm not quite sure it does, but 8 inches, and each one of your strips could be 2 inches wide. And join 4 together, and then turn the next block the other way, and you put your quilt together. It's super simple. I do have a free PDF. This is put out by the Fat Quarter Shop. I will link this down below. Free PDF. You don't have to put in your email or anything, and you can get this. This is actually for a 6-inch finished rail fence blocks, and so there are 3 in each. 3 strips in each block. So again, that would measure 2 inches wide, 3 inches. If you want yours 4 fabrics in yours, you could make it an 8-inch block. That's just going to determine how wide you cut your strips. So so you could do this a couple different ways. You could cut your strips 8 inches wide. I would do 8 1/2. Honestly, actually, I would do 8 1/2 inches, 4 fabrics all cut 2 1/2 inches, so that when you sew the 4 together, you're going to have 8 1/2 by 8 1/2. Okay. The other way you could do this is actually have long strips, whether it's jelly roll strips, or just long strips that you've cut 2 1/2 inches. You can join 4 long strips together and then subcut those into 8 1/2 inches wide if that's what you want. So how wide you cut your strips depends on how many strips you want in your block. If you're doing 4, each 2 inches wide, then you want to cut your strips 8 1/2 inches. If you're wanting 3, each 2 1/2 inches, starting at 2 inches finished, then you'd want to cut your strips 6 1/2 inches wide. So it's all math. Sorry for reverting back to elementary school, but it's all math. But if you don't want to figure that out, then you can grab the free PDF. This one gives you all different layouts. I mean the same layout, but it gives you all different sizes. So crib, lap, large lap, twin, queen, and king, all the way up. Tells you how many blocks you need. It tells you the final size, and all of that layout right there. So I will link that down below. Marsha's quilt is all done in reproduction fabrics. I love reproduction fabrics. It's just Oh, sorry about that. It just warms my heart, the reproduction. So all different colorways. She's got brown blocks, she's got green blocks, she's got red blocks, maroon, I want to say. They're all a muted color. She even has purple blocks in there. A lot of the brown blocks that she's used as alternating, but a really nice, pleasing pattern. A great way to figure out whether you've got your blocks, whether the color coordination is good or not, is to lay out your blocks and then take a picture using your phone, and then go into your edit feature and switch to monochromatic or black and white, whatever it says on your phone. And that will show you dark spots on your quilt, light spots on your quilt. So some of these blocks are going to read a little lighter, some are going to read a little darker. You want an even distribution if you're doing this. So just an easy trick to figure out whether your blocks are laid out in a pleasing fashion or not, as well as color. Not just is it the tone of it, but you don't want all your blues in one corner and all your reds in one. Even if the tones are evenly distributed, you would really want to mix this up as a scrappy quilt. The pantograph that she chose is the Easy Baptist Fan, because we're going with a Civil War reproduction, a classic block. We're doing a classic fabrics. We went with a classic pantograph, and you can't get much more classic or basic than a Baptist fan. I just love it. Stitches out so easy. This is the one I use is by Three Sisters Fabric. Pro Stitcher does have one that comes on your machine. It's tilted sideways, which is fine too, but I like this one. I've just used this one a lot, and it's super simple. I did keep it the same size that it is when it pulls into Pro Stitcher. I like that size for this one. So a pretty tight, I mean, maybe a finger width in between each of the rows. They do nest up in. Some of my tricks with that is when you're setting your space or decreasing your rows, I leave just a tad, maybe a 1/4 inch between where the one row stitches and the next one starts, and that way when I'm lining it up, I've got some leeway there, okay? It's always going to be better to have a little bit of space than it is to actually overlap the design where you accidentally stitch up into the next one. That's going to be very noticeable. But if you have a little bit of a 1/4 inch line there, you're not going to see it. And you may actually be able to see that better on the minky backing. So she chose this chocolate brown minky backing. Love this, love it, so cute. Now I know minky's not a classy fabric, classic fabric, but I think it's really nice feature on the back of this quilt. Just very warm and just shows off the quilting so well. So you can see from the Easy Baptist Fan how it stitches so it's going to stitch this fan here with this fan here, and then the next time it's stitching the alternate ones underneath there. So you'll notice right here I do have like a 1/4 inch of inch of space from where the point of that one. You could do it all the way down to that line. I just like to leave a little bit of space so that if I need to adjust, I have room to do that. Even if on my workspace, if I leave that little bit of a 1/4 inch space, I could always bump this up some even as I'm stitching it out to make it come a little closer. But I really like to give myself a little bit of cushion there, and so if any troubles come, I've got room to adjust. If you do this too far up, you're going to have this one stitch over the end of that little pie wedge right there, and that's going to be very noticeable on the back. So that's what I mean by leaving. It's not going to be as noticeable leaving a space as it is if you accidentally cross over the row above it. So really like that. Minky does not show your thread at all. It soaks right in, but the thread on the front is this 3016. This is Omni, and it's called Sandstone. It is very much of a darker, not a dark brown, but I would say a brown. It's not a cream, not a tan. It's a brown, but a lighter brown. And I think that blended super, super well. The quilting is really secondary to this design. You're going to see it once you get in close and see all the texture, but when you walk into a room, you're really going to see the pattern and the fabrics there. I did use a pre-wound bobbin on the back. They do sell some pre-wound bobbins in colors similar to this. I don't have that one. The one I used is light tan. So if it was on you know, a different backing where you might see it, I might switch to something a little darker in the minky because the threads soak into there. You can't even see it, but it's a light tan. So a little bit lighter than this, but not much. But with minky, I like, you can get away with not having exactly the same color thread on the back. And because the colors are very similar, it's going to blend in right there on the front. So that is Marsha's quilt. This is Selena's quilt, and this is the Pressed Flowers quilt along from the Sew Sampler box in 2023, ended 1st of 2024. And this uses the called for line, which was Sugarberry by Bunny Hill Designs. I'm not sure, I don't think that fabric line is available in Fat Quarter Shop anymore. You might be able to find it on an Etsy shop somewhere. But Bunny Hill Designs' current line, which is called Hollyhocks and Roses, I think, very similar colorway, and a lot of the same types of fabrics where you have I know there's a red gingham in that, there's red florals in that, so you could really use that fabric line and create a very, very similar quilt. So the way the quilt along works is in the Sew Sampler box you receive, I don't have block one. Oh, here's block one. You receive one pattern in each box each month. I didn't explain that very well. In the Sew Sampler box, when this quilt along was going along, you received one quilt block in each of the boxes for an entire year. Currently, this is the Peaceful Baskets quilt along that's going on right now. It'll finish in March, and then a new one will start in April, a new quilt along with the Sew Sampler box. I really butchered that, but you understand what I'm trying to say. So Pressed Flowers was 2023, April 2023 to March of 2024. These patterns are still available, but obviously the best deal would be to get them in your Sew Sampler box. But if you like this quilt and want to make it, these patterns are still available and then she used the Sugarberry line. Really cute. So you have 12 different blocks, then there are setting blocks in between. This is set on point, so all of the flowers are done on your block's actually made this way, but then you set it on point so you can really see those flower blocks. Really, really cute. Just love this. Love the fabrics. I have my blocks all together. If you remember, I did mine in pinks and browns, and I need to finish it up. I have all the blocks, I just haven't finished the setting part to it. And let me show you the backing fabric. This is part of that Sugarberry line as well. Has the little cardinals, very, very sweet. So the pantograph Selena chose for this one is Julie Hertz Cottonwood, and it is a 6-pointed flower. This stitches out 2 rows at a time, and they are offset. So here's a flower, and in the point where those 2 flowers meet is the top of a flower on the next row underneath it. So it's stitching 2 out at a time, which is nice, covers a little more space when you're quilting out a row. And then I leave just a tad bit of space in between those 2 rows, just so that I have some wiggle room to be able to adjust that pattern as it's rotating through the quilt. So I leave just, not even a 1/4 inch, maybe 1/8 of an inch gap right there. That way when I'm lining up the next one, I can tuck in a little batting if I need to adjust where that pattern is hitting on the quilt top. So did use cream color thread on this, again, which is 3004. That's the Omni thread by Superior Threads. Our background fabric is a cream with a gray on top, or kind of a taupey gray, and felt cream blended better with that rather than a white thread on top. I also did the binding for Selena on this one. Now the fabric that she sent was the called for given fabric, and that's part of that sugarberry line. Now I want you to notice, let me hold it this way. This is a striped design. And I thought, you know, instead of doing the binding this way where it was going to be stripes like that, or it was going to be stripes like that, this one would have looked nice, but I just decided to do the bias cut binding. So that's why my leftovers are in a triangle shape. And so when you do the bias cut, it gives it a little bit more of like a candy cane stripe of feel where it's coming down the quilt like that. I really like that one. I think it wasn't, Selena didn't say I want it this way or that way. I just felt with the fabric that was sent that this binding was, this type of a binding with the bias cut was really nice. I like that. Like the red finish around the outside edge. I think that's a nice frame for the entire quilt, and Selena did such a nice job. I just love this quilt. This is Sharon's quilt, and she created this using the Simply Jelly Rolls book by It's So Emma, and she kindly sent me a photocopy of the front. And the quilt name from this book is called Baklava. So obviously in a book that's called Simply Jelly Rolls, this uses all jelly roll strips. I don't have the fabric line, but it is a muted tone-on-tone type of fabric line, browns, tans, creams, really, really cute. Very simple, very modern, very calming, pleasing, and so you can see, let me see how you can best see. So each block is created with 4 blocks and some longer strips, no, a little different. So I'm seeing some shorter squares here, 3 strips together, and then here as well, turned a different way. There's 4 of those in a block with some sashing in between. But then I see other blocks that have longer strips here. So a really nice, pleasing effect. I just think that's really, really cute. The sashing that she has used in between the blocks is just a white or a cream kind of muslin type of fabric there. So the backing fabric, she also, oh no, I forgot. I was thinking there was a muslin on the back here, but this is a tone-on-tone, like almost like a cream on top of a tan, just tiny little fronds is what it looks like. So you can see it's just a tad bit darker than the front, really nice. She did a nice job picking out fabrics here. The pantograph, this is called Moulin Rouge, and I just love this one. I probably say that every time, and I apologize, but it's so fun to stitch out. So you have a swirl right here, another smaller swirl here. It's got a little bubble on the top of that swirl. Then we have like a feather design that's echoed. Over here we have a feather design that's echoed, feather design that's echoed once to get back around, and then another swirl, and it kicks back out and starts the whole thing again, just in the opposite direction. So this one, the swirl and the feathers are pointing up. This one, the feather and the swirls are pointing down. This is one of those that it's combining motifs. So if you are a hand-guided quilter and you learn a swirl motif, you learn a circle motif, you learn a feather motif with some echoing on that, and then you can do a quilt with just feathers, you know, or just this paisley type of thing. So I would say a feather, you have a backbone to it, and then you're going to have your loops that then tie into that that backbone. With a paisley, I would say it's very similar in a lot of ways, the movement of that loop type feel. I say loop, not really a loop. It's more, you know, it's a feather shape. So on a backbone of a feather, it's going to be shaped one way. A paisley, it's kind of the same thing, but you're not hooking it into a backbone. per se. And so when I was doing hand-guided work, I would do a paisley design where it was just an all-over paisley. You had this loop here and a loop here and a loop here. You would echo that a couple times, come back out and do another loop. I did other hand-guided work where I did all swirls. You just swirl in, swirl out, come back, swirl in, swirl out, come back, swirl in. So you can do a whole quilt with swirls, you can do a whole quilt with paisley, you can do a whole quilt with feathers, with backbones, you can do a whole quilt with circles if you wanted to. But then once you do that, then you can combine those pantographs or those motifs in your muscle memory that you have. Do a swirl, then do a paisley on top of that, and then come out, do a swirl, and then echo back, do a paisley, and you're just meandering to the next spot. I always coached people when I was doing hand-guided that practice on a marker board. If you have a large marker board, the larger the better, I would say. You know, so go to your box store and get a 3x4 marker board with some dry erase markers, and then hold them in your hands like this with the dry erase marker part down here. You hold them in your hands like this. I wouldn't do 2 at a time. You could do 2 at a time. No, you wouldn't need to do 2 at a time, because on the machine, you're holding 2 hands at a time. But really, if you're right-handed, I would do it with your right hand, because that's the muscle memory that you need. If you're left-handed, I would do it with your left hand. But on that marker board, have it flat in front of you, and you're just drawing designs. Practice working yourself into a corner, getting yourself back out, because you're going to have to do that between your leader bars. You know, practice doing those before you're ever doing it with thread. Practice it in marker over and over and over. Practice your swirls in and out and meandering all over that board, in and out, filling that entire space, making it so it's pleasingly done in an even distribution over that marker board. Erase it back off and do it again. Do it until that muscle movement in your hand to your brain is just automatic. So then when you move to the machine and practice, yes, there's going to be a little bit of a learning curve there, but the motion that you're doing will be in your brain. You're going to have a little bit of different tension, I guess you want to say, in the moving of a machine rather than moving a marker across a board. But you just want to practice that movement. And then once you have paisley down, once you have swirl down, then practice on your board combining the two together and then eventually moving to thread. But that's how I always did it. You can do it on, if you already have a quilt on your Longarm, and you can spread some like a clear plastic across there. Always mark your edges of your plastic so you don't accidentally move onto your quilt top, but I would do that sometimes as well, just to practice. You just need to practice, you know. My husband says it's seat time. He was told it's seat time. It's driving a tractor. How do you get good at making those straight lines? Now they have GPS and it's a whole different deal. But seat time. You need to be in the seat. And in order to do hand-guided work, you just have to practice. You have to practice, and then move on to your thread and your machine and doing it that way. But if you're a digital long-arm quilter like I am, then you find the Moulin Rouge pattern and you stitch it out. I did this one about, I would say, 7 inches tall, not super tight, not super big. Moulin Rouge has a really nice coverage in there. It does nest up well into the design, into the row above it, so that they nest well. You could even do it a little closer if you wanted to have your circles touch the one below it. I don't like to do that because there's too much room for error there. So I just have it, you know, it's fairly close, less than my finger width apart between the rows, but it gives a nice coverage overall. I did use cream color thread on this one, the Omni 3004. I felt white was too bright. These are a little muted colors. The background fabric here is more of a creamy muslin, not necessarily a white, and so I felt the cream blended really well. It gives lots of great texture on this quilt. So let me find the measurements for you. The measurements on this one are square. It's 66 by 66. The pattern The pattern that she sent me, the photo of, actually says it measures 70 by 70, so I'm sure they put a larger border around the edge than Sharon did. I also wanted to mention, when I was looking up this book on Fat Quarter Shop so that I could link it for you down below, I did find a quilt along that they did with this book back in 2023. I was unaware of this, or I didn't have the book, wasn't paying attention, I don't know. But these are still free PDFs on Fat Quarter Shop website. So you do have to have the book, but they used patterns from, or blocks from each one of the quilts that's in the book, and then combined them together to make a sampler quilt from those. It's really cute. I really like this. Let me see, the measurements on this one are 80 by 86. So there is a fabric requirements, what you would need. It's laid out in a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 week quilt along. So you could grab some buddies and do this together. You could do it for yourself, just do a first 2 months of the year if you wanted to do your own little quilt along a little bit at a time. So I will link this down below as well. So what they do is each week they show you the block that you're making, how to cut those, but then it tells you where those instructions are in the book, so the ones that you want. And then the finishing instructions, which I showed you the final quilt there. So I will link this down below as well if you're interested in using that book in a little different way. I love when companies do this, because not only can you make each quilt in the book, you got an extra pattern by combining those, the different quilts into one, more of a sampler quilt. I love it also when designers do like a sampler block, like a quilt where they have sample blocks, all different blocks in it, but then they break it down where this is what it would look like if you use just this block in one whole quilt. I like that. So this is kind of the opposite. But so really, really neat. If you like this baklava quilt, you'll want to get that book, Simply Jelly Roll Quilts. So I hope you enjoyed those customer quilts today. And again, I want to take this chance to wish you a very Merry Christmas. I hope your holiday is full of all the presents that you're wanting, but also some worship time of worshiping our Savior, who's the whole reason we even celebrate Christmas, as well as spending time with your family. And I hope each of you has a wonderful Christmas season and a happy new year. And I will be back next week with my sewing room tour, and the week after with question and answer. And then the first week in January, I will be back with more customer quilts, because every quilt is worth finishing. Happy New Year, Merry Christmas, and we'll see you next week.